Córdoba, October 8th, 2011. It is a Saturday afternoon like any other in the Andalusian capital. Autumn has just settled over the city, but the lingering heat of summer still invites people outdoors, seeking the shade of trees and the last hours of daylight that grow shorter with each passing week. In Cruz Conde Park, one of the largest and most frequented green spaces in Córdoba, life unfolds with the peaceful normality of a weekend afternoon in a Spanish provincial city. Families stroll along the dirt paths. Couples sit on stone benches. Children run between the swings and slides. Dogs pull at their leashes. Elderly men walk slowly, with their hands behind their backs. The park is a microcosm of everyday life, a stage for that gentle, predictable routine we take for granted until something shatters it beyond repair. But among all the people in the park that afternoon is a man walking with two small children. His name is Bretón Gómez. He is 38 years old, and the two children are his, Ruth, aged 6, and Jose, aged 2. At first glance, nothing distinguishes this father and his children from any other family enjoying the park. They are just another image in the landscape of daily life. A father with his children on a Saturday afternoon. Nothing more common, nothing more reassuring, nothing more innocent. But what is about to happen in the coming hours will transform that seemingly innocent image into the prelude to one of the most devastating tragedies in recent Spanish criminal history. A tragedy that will shake an entire nation and leave a wound in the collective conscience that time has not been able to close. Before we continue, and I want to invite you to subscribe to this channel if you haven't already. It's completely free, costs you nothing, and every subscription helps us enormously in continuing to investigate and produce high-quality documentaries about real cases that deserve to be told with rigor and respect. Hit the subscribe button and turn on notifications so you don't miss any of our upcoming work. Now, let us return to Córdoba, because what is about to unfold will shake Spain to its core. The first alarm sounds when Ruth Ortiz, the children's mother, waits for them to be returned at the end of the visitation period, and they don't appear. Jose Bretón doesn't bring the children back, and when asked where they are, his answer becomes the starting point of a collective nightmare. He says he lost them, or that they were in the park, and suddenly they weren't there. That he got distracted for a moment, and when he looked again, the children had vanished. Just like that. As if two small children could evaporate into thin air, as if the most natural thing in the world was for a father to lose both his children in a public park on a Saturday afternoon. The immediate reaction is confusion, disbelief, the bewilderment that occurs when reality presents a version of events that fits no known pattern. Ruth Ortiz enters a state of anguish that is easy to imagine, but impossible to describe. The anguish of a mother who doesn't know where her children are. The search is activated. Police are alerted. An operation begins that will grow into one of the largest and most heavily covered in recent Spanish history. Security cameras are reviewed, all potential witnesses interrogated, the park's surroundings combed. And here, something begins to emerge. At first, just an intuition, a feeling, but one that grows stronger with each passing hour. Something doesn't add up in Jose Bretón's account. Something in his story, in his behavior, in the way he reacts to the disappearance of his own children, is not normal. What most disturbs the investigators is the excessive precision of his account. Bretón describes the events with a coherence that is suspicious precisely because it is too perfect. Real witnesses to traumatic events typically have fragmentary, confused memories, full of gaps and contradictions. But Bretón's account is clean, polished, as though rehearsed. And when pressed to elaborate on certain details, when confronted with unexpected questions, the gaps appear, inconsistencies that reveal a narrative whose beams aren't properly assembled. To understand how things reached this point, we must look at who José Bretón truly is. Beneath the surface of apparent normality beats something different, an obsessive need for control, an inability to accept frustration, an emotional coldness disguised as calm, a persistent tendency toward manipulation. His marriage to Ruth Ortiz was marked by domination and control. When that control was threatened, when reality refused to bend to his demands, he didn't react with explosive violence, but with a cold, calculated, systematic form of aggression, more dangerous than physical violence, precisely because it was invisible. Ruth Ortiz's decision to separate was the trigger. For a man whose identity was built on control, losing control over his partner and his family was unbearable. The separation was not simply the end of a marriage, it was the destruction of everything he believed himself to be. And that narcissistic wound fueled the most monstrous decision a human being can make. The investigation centers increasingly on a rural property the family owns outside Córdoba at Las Quemadillas. Investigators find evidence of a recent bonfire of considerable size, a bonfire Bretón cannot satisfactorily explain. They find remains that need to be analyzed, materials that must be sent to forensic laboratories. The forensic analysis of the ashes becomes the central axis of the investigation. Teams work with extreme meticulousness, aware that every particle could be the key to solving the case. The process is slow, agonizing for everyone involved. Meanwhile, Bretón maintains his version with a tenacity that becomes increasingly implausible. He insists the children disappeared in the park. He insists he's a victim. And yet his behavior continues to emit signals that contradict his words. His coldness is so striking that even those most willing to give him the benefit of the doubt begin questioning whether they are looking at an innocent father or something entirely different. Throughout this period, Bretón's behavior becomes a case study in the psychology of manipulation and deception. He doesn't collapse, doesn't confess, shows neither remorse nor genuine pain. He maintains that facade of controlled frigidity that has been his hallmark from the beginning, a mask of impassivity that for some is proof of innocence, and for the vast majority is the most eloquent proof of guilt, because no innocent father could sit accused of his children's death with the calmness of someone waiting for a boring meeting to end. Finally, after months of collective agony, the forensic results confirm what many feared. The remains found at Las Quemadillas are compatible with human remains. The bone fragments recovered from the ashes present characteristics that forensic experts identify as belonging to young individuals. Science, in its cold and precise language, is saying what human words resist speaking, that Ruth and José did not disappear in a park, were not kidnapped, are not alive somewhere. The children are in those ashes. The children are in those fragments. Their own father took them to that property to do what no sound mind can conceive. The moment this truth becomes public is one of collective devastation. Spain stops. News anchors struggle to maintain composure. Journalists who have followed the case for months break down on air. People weep in streets, in bars, in homes, for two children they never knew, but whose suffering they feel as their own. For Ruth Ortiz, it is the end of a world. The moment the last thread of hope is extinguished, and what remains is a void so immense that no word in any language can describe it. José Bretón is formally arrested and charged with the murder of his 2 children. The trial becomes one of the most followed in recent Spanish history, held before a popular jury. The evidence is presented with meticulous thoroughness. The forensic experts describe their analyses with the rigor science demands and the sensitivity the situation requires. When a forensic expert speaks of bone fragments compatible with young individuals, when they describe the temperatures needed to produce certain types of calcination, they are translating horror into neutral language that paradoxically makes it more unbearable. Throughout the trial, Bretón maintains his position. He doesn't confess. He doesn't break down. He shows no genuine remorse or pain. And after deliberation, the jury delivers its verdict: guilty. José Bretón is found guilty of the murder of both his children. The sentence is 40 years in prison, the maximum the Spanish Penal Code allows. 40 years. A number that sounds decisive, but feels obscenely insufficient when measured against what he destroyed. The Bretón case forced society to confront the concept of vicarious violence, the use of children as instruments to harm a partner, which before this case was virtually unknown to the Spanish public. It revealed that gender violence is not limited to direct blows and threats, but can adopt far more devastating forms. In the years since, legislative advances and improved protocols have been implemented, driven partly by the awareness this case generated. But these advances came too late for Ruth and José. In Cruz Conde Park, life goes on. Trees still give shade, children still play on the swings, families still stroll on Saturday afternoons. But for anyone who knows the story, the park is no longer just a green space. It is a place of memory, a place where the innocence of 2 children was betrayed by the person who should have protected them most. Ruth and José, 6 years old and 2 years old. 2 names that should have grown into adults, into citizens, into full people with complete and rich lives. 2 names that instead became a symbol of the most absolute horror one human being can inflict upon another. 2 names that remind us that the protection of children is not a responsibility we can delegate or take for granted. Somewhere in the park, when the afternoon fades and shadows stretch across the grass, you can imagine hearing the laughter of 2 children. A distant, faint laugh, like a whisper from another time. It is both the most beautiful and the most painful sound in the world. A laugh that asks us to remember, to never forget, to do everything possible so that no other child ever has to stop laughing. That request, that silent laughter floating over the park like a wordless prayer, is the most precious and most painful legacy Ruth and José left behind. A legacy we cannot betray. A legacy we must never forget.